Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Baby and Them, where we talk about all things birthing and parenting beyond the binary. I'm here with Alicia Sanchez Gill today. I'm so grateful to be talking to you, Alicia. My name is Laura Beth, for everyone who's wondering out there. I go by they, them, or she, her pronouns. I accept all of them. But I'm going to actually throw it over to our special guest today, Alicia, to tell us about themselves. So, Alicia, how do you identify? What do you want people to know about you? How would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura Beth, for having me and for creating space for these conversations. So yeah, my name's Alicia. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I am a mama of a 20-month-old. I am a queer Black Latina with roots in both the rural South of the United States as well as Loíza, Puerto Rico. I'm a survivor both of child sexual violence and also family violence, family domestic violence, and I think that also really informs my both my work in my day job and my volunteering and organizing, and also in my parenting. So I'm really excited to share a bit of our process, my wife and I's process, and also our story and experience with y'all today.
Well, thank you so much for being here and making the time. It means so much. And to the community who's been following the series, people always share that they're really excited to hear how different families go about parenting in a non-binary, gender-free, or gender-fluid way. So before we jump off, I always like to ask everybody, what does family mean to you? What does your family structure look like? How would you define family? What is that looking like for you?
Yeah, that's a great big question. A great big question. I think so. I would say that in our immediate household, it's my wife, myself, and our 20-month-old. And so that's just a small constellation of family. And then I would say as a Black queer person, I have maybe complicated relationship to the idea of family, right? I think that queer folks, Black folks in particular, have had a lot of practice with creating family outside of our traditional norms or traditional understandings of a family unit, whether that's being raised by grandparents or building family through our deep and intimate friendships because of being you know, kind of ousted by our families of origin or families of birth. And so I would say for me, family is who I feel safest with, the people that I feel in deep community with, the people that I want to show up for, the people that I love and who love me and who have learned through trial and error and long processes how to love me well, and how I've learned how to love them well. So I think family is really a practice of our own creation, and I feel really grateful to be able to be very subversive in the way that we practice family through our most intimate relationships. It's really fun for our baby also to learn different kinds of families, not just through their parents, but through having multiple safe adults in their life, right? So I think it's really healthy for children to have many adults in their life who are caring for them, and it really does take a village. So so family
Absolutely.
is a wide net.
I love that you have a wide net. And, that's a common theme in this series. Queer folks, we often have different structures of what family can look like, and that's extended. And then also there's a layer of intersectional identity of you being Black and Latina and what that looks like too, showing up. So I'm wondering, growing up with that positionality, did you know if you always wanted to be a parent? How did you come to that decision? What did that look like for you and your partner?
Yeah, I we both knew that we wanted to be parents. I think that we came to, sorry, I have an eyelash in my eye because I'm just I'm just a human with an eyelash in our eye today.
Yeah.
I think my wife and I both had a desire to build family. I knew, so I wanted to be pregnant if it were possible, right? I wanted to have the experience in my body of being pregnant. My wife was less attached to the idea of pregnancy or even having a newborn, right? I think she would have been happy if we adopted, and we might, who knows, that's still on the table to adopt or foster or find other ways to be in community with children that we love. But we both knew we wanted to be parents. I think I knew from a very, we both actually, we talk about this, we both knew from very early ages that we wanted to be parents. And I'm surprised sometimes by my desire to parent, given that I'm like also the oldest immigrant child daughter, and like the amount of kind of family caretaking that I had to do as a young person. I feel like it could either make you really want to nurture a small human in your life, or it could make you really like averse to also wanting to then be a parent. And I'm really happy that for us, like it just happened to work out that I really wanted to be a parent, and that my wife and I were in alignment about that.
Yeah, that's really wild that you bring up the immigrant experience. I definitely can resonate, not as the
Mhm.
oldest, but just like definitely the experience and, having to be kind of an adult at a young age, like
Yes.
navigate the world and supporting your family, especially when you're learning English and helping your parents. And
Yep.
we've already labored so much by the time that
Yes.
we become parents.
God.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, and so I'm wondering, you know, what were you excited about for becoming a parent? Because you made that choice, like you said, some people like really are like averse to it, and that's totally great if that's what works for you. But you like leaned into it. You and your partner are like so excited. What made you excited about it?
I mean, I think that like bringing Black life into the world is like such a beautiful gift for me. Again, this is just, I can't speak to everyone's experience, but I will say that for me and for us, like the ability to like to like manifest our love, my wife and I's love for each other, our love for Black people, and our love for community in this very specific way, um, and to like help to like raise a child who is like a good human, and who I know will just like absolutely be like a light in the world in whatever way they choose. It feels like such a gift to be able to yeah, to bring forth Black life in this way. And I feel like my both that my body did something really tremendous and magical, and also that like every day we get to like show up and parent. And I think I was really excited too um to like learn from this person and also teach this person, and also to get to like carry on like familial traditions, and also create new traditions that perhaps my wife and I didn't have growing up, based on our own kind of like family relationships. It's just a really beautiful gift to be able to steward Black life in the world.
Ugh. One thing that's like really hard for me as a parent now is I get like teary-eyed when I hear other parents talk about their kids because I like feel you so hard. Is
Yeah.
beautiful. And you talked about, the baby being a light in this world, right? Whatever way they choose to do that. And I agree, like when the baby comes out of the world, like, or into the world rather, earth side, they're just like glowing and so excited and happy and smiling and bubbly. And you just want to kind of like nourish that light to, thrive. And
Yes.
so, being a parent is like has a lot of joy, but it also has some challenges. So I'm sort of curious, you decided that you wanted to
That's an
parent
understatement.
challenging. But
I'm
you
just so tired all
I
the
know. Maybe
time.
we should have instead of doing this, we should have just traded naps. Like
I like just like a deep practice of rest is what we could call it, because like really we need it.
it's so joyful and so sleep deprived.
Exactly.
But I'm sort of wondering, you decided you were going to do non-binary, gender-free, let your child decide, and that's definitely what my partner and I, my wife and I are doing as well. And I'm sort of curious, how did you come about that decision? Like, what challenges did you face in making that decision? And then also, since you've had the baby, um, yeah, it's
Mm.
like, what is that process like pre and post making that choice, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I want to like enter this with a lot of like nuance, because I don't know that, we're not perfect. We don't always get it right ourselves, right? But I think that for my wife and I, it was kind of like intuitive for us. I think that like um in our own kind of ways, we subvert gender norms, right? And we've also seen, just like in our own lives, like the impact of the gender binary on ourselves, on like familial norms, on like children in our lives that we love. Like, I think for us, the idea was like our child, and also just like as queer people too, um, like the assumption, like there was so much harm in the assumption that I was straight in my own childhood, right? And so I think for us, like we moved into parenthood with with like the assumption, right, that our child is neither straight or cisgender, and they can tell us who they are when they are ready. And right now, we just give them lots of choice and freedom and options. Like as a queer Black couple raising a queer Black, a free Black child, we don't know that they identify as queer yet. But like wanting to raise a free Black child, I think that for us, it was really about having the most expansive view of gender possible. And so when we entered into the idea of pregnancy, it was kind of a given that we would use gender neutral pronouns and offer our child gender neutral clothing and toys, until they kind of pointed out to us what they wanted, right? Even now at 20 months old, this morning I gave my child the option of two different sweaters and let them choose which one they wanted to wear. Of course, I picked out both sweaters, so it's like not a full not the full extent of choice, right? But I think even in like really small ways, we can begin to give our children choice. We can like use the language and practice of consent from a very, very early age. And so I think for us, like it was really clear that we would use gender neutral pronouns. And I would say that um kind of the hardest part about about like utilizing gender neutral pronouns is actually a probably not uncommon, has been with like family, particularly like older family members. But I would say like our family does, we have like, because maybe because we've just been gay so long, like we have had a lot of practice with our family around some of these concepts. And I, again, like I know that that's not everyone's story. For some of us, like family has been, particularly like our families of birth, families of origin, have been just like a really hard place for us to be our full and authentic selves. And it's still, it takes a lot of practice for us with our own like families of origin. But I would say like that's often like the hardest place. Our child's in daycare, their daycare does really well about using gender neutral pronouns. They read books that feature all kinds of families. Our friends are super supportive. I do get nervous about what will happen as our little one gets a little bit older, and you know the dynamics of like school systems and like how we're going to navigate that. So I'm always really looking for feedback and like other parents who've had that experience, so that you know we can learn from them. But I think for us it was really about our child having the freedom to, and the bodily autonomy, and like bodily sovereignty to like choose what words make sense for them, and we will teach them all of the words and all of the body parts so they can understand how to describe themselves.
Absolutely. I agree. And I also love that you said, you know, you didn't want to make the assumption that your child is cis or straight because that
Totally,
assumption was so harmful for you and for your partner.
totally.
And I think all queer folks can resonate with that, right? Like having that harmful upbringing of just like heteronormativity and the cis
Exactly.
normativity, right? And the assumptions of like not having the freedom to explore our identities freely. And then when we want to share that, kind of the shame around it and the compounding pressure of society, and
Yeah,
wanting to just crack that open for our children and say like, hey, whatever you choose is right, and like you actually don't have to come out, like you can just
right.
be who you are from the beginning, right? Like
Yes, exactly.
like a
Right.
virgin.
Right, if I never assume that you're straight, you'll never have to come out to me. Like, that's
Exactly.
the goal, right?
That's
Like,
the goal.
if
It's
I
like
don't assume that you're cis, I mean, maybe you still want to, like, reveal, you know? I'm
and then
kind
do
of
it.
campy and showy myself, so, like, I love a good big reveal, but, you know, like, the goal is that you don't have to undo, right? Like, I don't want them to have to undo, like, years and years of, like, conditioning, and we're in it, right? We're still in it, so there's still gonna be I still, you know, like, we still all, like, we're, like, navigating the waters as we're in them and, like, breathing the air, right? So we're still like unpacking our own internalized heterosexism and sexism and colorism and racism and everything else, and like gender norms, right? And so of course we're still in it, but like the goal is to reduce the amount of navigating that they'll have to do, and also creating the world that is like easier for them to be their most full selves, like, right, like that's my goal too, is like it's not just about our little family and like our constellation of families and friends, right? It's also about like a world where our children are safer.
I think that's like one of the biggest things. It's really about safety, whether people believe it or not. Like I think a lot of times
Totally.
people push back and want to assume that we're doing things out of our own self-interest, right? Or just like we're pushing our agenda, whatever that means. But at the end of the day, our realities are real. They're lived experiences, and we know
Yep.
what safety looks like for us, and we're carving
Yep.
that safety out for our children as well. And
Exactly.
I wonder for you, what does it feel like? Because what you, as you said, we're still in the water, right? Of trying to work through all of this. It's around us
Yeah.
everywhere. I wonder for you, do you ever feel like the pressure? Because honestly, like we're among the first families that are doing this, right? In such actually, I don't think we're the first families that are doing this, but like it seems constantly like we are when
Mhm.
we're not. We know all types of families have always existed and all
Yes.
different cultures, right? But
Yep.
it always seems like we're the first ones doing it because there's so few people are catching up and gender is still harmful, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm wondering, like, do you feel pressure of like being the first or being like the only, or is that
Mhm.
not your experience at all? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. I guess I know that our transcestors and like queer ancestors exist, right? Like I was just reading something the other day about like Polly Murray and like, just thinking about like, and even like people in my own, there were like plenty of queer folks in our own family. We might not have called them that then, right? And they're like non-binary folks and like gender expansive folks in my own family, even if we didn't like use the same language. So like, yeah, I think to your point, we've always been here. Um, and so that helps
Just
me
had to
feel less
shout out
alone.
Polly. Just
Hmm?
big. I just had to
Oh,
shout
shut up.
out Polly.
Yeah. 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 So I think that that like helps me feel less alone. And yeah, even though we are perhaps like our the only folks in our friend groups who are kind of explicitly choosing this kind of like gender neutral, and we're not even actually the only friends in our friend group, that might also be like based on our like we live in the DC metro area, and like I feel like DC is kind of like a black LGBTQ mecca, so it might also just be like a partly about like our own geography and like where we are in the world literally, that I don't feel quite as alone, but I do think there's a way in which like yeah, we are one of the only folks in our community who are like making an active choice to use gender neutral pronouns until our child tells us differently. Um but I think that because we've had so much support from friends and family and like community, I feel a lot less alone in that choice. And I think that what this offers us and our community is like a space of like hope and like possibility. And that's not to say that the folks who have chosen to like give their children, use gendered pronouns or have a gender specific name, like it's not to say that other folks are doing it wrong or that we're doing it right necessarily, but I do think that it's like it has been such a gift to like open up the possibility for folks, that you can do this, right? And it's always really interesting when we like tell other people that we're like just meeting. And I'm sometimes cautious about how I talk about our child's pronouns, because I'm not trying to make us like our lives more unsafe, but like when we do trust folks enough to like disclose pronouns in that specific way, because people make just the weirdest assumptions about children based on what they're wearing or how their hair is done. Just if like our baby's wearing pink or blue, like, or whatever color in between, like yellow, right? Like people make a lot of assumptions about our child's gender. And so I don't always correct people like strangers, right? Like, if they gender our child as a he or as she, like we don't necessarily correct. But if I trust you enough to say, like, oh, actually, we use gender neutral pronouns, I'm always like really surprised by like how often people are like, "Oh, that's awesome. Oh, great. Like, sorry for making an assumption." Like people, I think that there's like a lot more awareness now about like gender neutral identities and also like just like gender being on a spectrum. And so I'm actually pretty surprised. And again, that could be just because of where we live, that like people are often very receptive to hearing that we use gender neutral pronouns. So I feel less alone.
I'm so glad to hear that. And yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with I was shocked to see that a lot of people just often use they them as well, like if they're not sure, right? They'll say like,
Totally.
"Oh,
Totally.
what a beautiful baby. Like, what's
Yep.
their name?" Like, of course,
Yep.
it's like those instances where people do gender and you just kind of like you, if I don't feel like that's safe, I'll just let it roll off my back because that person
Totally.
really doesn't matter and the child's not like speaking yet. But
Yep.
more often than not, people will just say like, "Oh, like, okay, that's a beautiful baby," and keep it moving.
Yep.
And
Or
it kind of
what's your little one's name? And like
yeah.
our child's name doesn't actually help because it's like pretty gender neutral as well. So it was like, okay. So then people just stick with they them pronouns and it's cool. And I try to model for folks and like even if someone's using a specific gender pronoun, I continue to model they them.
Yeah. Another one
Yeah.
that my wife does is when people will be like, "Oh, is it a boy or a girl?" She'll just be like, "Oh, the baby's name is Baldwin," and then
Mhm.
usually people will be like, "Oh, you're not disclosing,"
Yep,
and be
exactly.
respectful and just like keep on moving, which I think
Yep.
that's pretty great. And we also
Yeah.
have different ways to kind of like navigate that.
Yep. Totally.
And so I'm sort of wondering, one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you is because I saw this tweet that you did that ended up on Latinx Parenting's Instagram about being in the grocery store.
Oh
And
my
it's
God.
like, it's a human. And I just love that story. Would you mind sharing a little bit about it?
Oh God. It was so long ago now. I feel like also, when you're a parent, like every day is like 10 years. So it was like also like I wasn't trying to go viral. And sometimes you just like go viral in like the least convenient times or whatever. I was like, how did people see this? Like I am not an important person. But yeah, we were, and this is not, certainly that was one of the earliest times, but certainly not the only time where a stranger came up to me and asked, like, is it a boy or a girl? Oh, your baby's so cute. And I think I might have said like, oh, they're a human. I didn't chastise who was like an older, like it was an elder. I didn't correct that person in the moment, but I thought a lot about, because like kind of not my role to correct this, correct strangers about the pronouns, but it is always interesting the way that people talk about our child based on what they think that the baby's gender is. And I think that that's what I was really struck by in the interaction, right? Is I took our baby to like this outdoor event recently, and the people who assumed that they were a girl were like, "She's so cute. She's so beautiful." And then like many of them actually caught themselves and said, "Oh, I'm sure she's also smart." Or I'm sure she's going to be powerful, right? Like, but like people's instant reaction was, "She's so cute. She's so pretty. Um she's so sweet," right? And like when people assume that our child is a boy, it's like, "Oh, you're so smart, you're so brave, you're so different identifiers or adjectives that aren't about looks," right? And so I think that that's what I'm constantly struck by, is just like how quickly our attachment to like expectations around gender begin. I certainly did not mean for it to go viral in that specific way, but I am constantly struck by the way that we project all of these gender norms on like very small children who can't even talk yet, right? Based on like what they're wearing, right? And I found that like when we actually have to believe that non-binary people exist. I feel like sometimes we we think of like non-binary folks as like either gender light diet, either gender, right? And I think that like when people are clear that our child for now is using they them pronouns, like it's amazing to see people release attachment to gender stereotypes. And so that has been like really profound to watch. Even though, like going viral on the internet and having a lot of people like very angry at me and our family structure was like, yeah, also a lesson. It's made me like we were already pretty protective of like our child in particular, like around like showing their face or like talking a lot about, I mean, I talk a lot about being a parent, but I don't like, talk a lot about our child or milestone, right? I don't show pictures of their face really very often. And so that experience also made me very protective because one of the things, right, we see in the news, we're like very clear that like queer and trans families, in particular trans like families with trans folks, are like under attack right now. Like queer and trans teachers are under attack, right? And so there were like people who were literally threatening to call child protective services on us for using gender neutral pronouns with our child. We were like this like tweet thread was like being picked up in like right-wing media. It was kind of wild. And so it made me incredibly protective and also really clear like that we have a responsibility not just to our own families but to all trans and queer families, especially trans and queer non-binary youth in this moment, to like protect them, protect their families, and ensure that there's like no more like policies and legislations that try to harm and separate our families.
Thank you. That's so beautifully said. And as a non-binary person, I really appreciate you validating that we exist and that we don't always look like what people imagine, right? Like
Yes,
cis folks don't own what genders can look like.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
so, like, as a person who's like identifies as femme, people are constantly like, "Oh, like how can you be non-binary? You look like so much like a woman." And there's just like so much unlearning and unpacking to be done
Yes.
there. And
Yes.
so like you standing up and being visible just about like your corner of the world and what you're doing makes space for other people too. So it's really valuable and I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate you being thoughtful about protecting yourself too, right? And that's something like I think all parents think about, right? Like being like really surface and cute, but never really disclosing too much and about locations and things like that to protect your family. It's a real particular decision to make in doing this work. So I just
Yeah.
into the fact that it's radical, right? A lot of people just think we're just out here sharing, but it's
Yep.
really brave to do it, and we shouldn't have to be brave. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um,
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, also, yeah, thank you for sharing kind of like what that experience is like for you. Um, and like, yeah, we have too many myths about like what we think, like like non-binary identity is supposed to look like. And like it's very white, it's very masculine centered, it's very like thin, right? Like there's like a very specific aesthetic
like
that
everybody's Shane from the L world.
yeah, exactly, right.
Nobody
Yeah, like
else.
yeah. I mean, I like never watched the L Word really, but my wife was like obsessed with the first girl. I don't know if I think she watched the second version too, but like the first version was like her jam. I was just like, there's like a bunch of white people here. I like can't. And I also lived in DC, so I was like very gay, black gay. So I was just like, this doesn't resonate with me. But yes, I know exactly who Shane is, and that's exactly what people think of. And like
I will say
that,
though, the second season, I know this is like a total tangent, but
yeah.
or the second iteration rather is pretty great. So
Oh, awesome.
have
Yeah.
any
And a
time.
lot more diverse, I've seen.
Exactly. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
really like appreciate the young black child of Bet Porter. Like I've just never seen a black child growing up in like a queer family and being queer. But anyway, it was like such a tangent. So sorry. Throwing it back.
No, this is like perfectly, this seems exactly divinely aligned. This is exactly right. I love it. I want to talk about pop culture too.
All the time.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a lighter note, I'm sort of curious, would you be open to sharing anything about your birthing journey and what that was like? Just like anything at all. There's so many components from like getting pregnant to being pregnant, then the delivery and like fourth trimester and postpartum. Is there anything
Yeah.
about your story that you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. Yeah, there's plenty. Oh my God. I like love talking about this. I'm always like, if you want to talk about birthing, like hit me up. It's probably really awkward for folks, but I'm like, I love talking about this. I'll just say for us, like I carried the baby physically. My wife carried a lot of the emotional parts of it. But yeah, I feel like I can't give like exact dates, but I feel like we started the process of like trying to um, go through like we did IUI, and I can talk more about that in a second, but we started the process in like maybe the fall of 2018, I think is when we first started, or maybe, yeah, sometime at the end of 2018. And I did, or maybe it was 2019, I don't remember. I think it was like the fall of 2018. So we did like a bunch in order to do IUI. We did a lot of testing. I remember specifically one test where they had to like stick iodine up my vagina, and then like for the rest of the day, I was just like dripping iodine. It was very awkward because I had to go to work right afterwards. um, and so, yeah, there was lots of testing. There was like testing eggs. There was like checking my fallopian tubes, checking all of like the inner workings to see if it was feasible for me to deliver. um and then we took like a little bit of a pause because the whole process can sometimes be really confusing. There's a lot of paperwork, there was a lot of doctor's visits, and it can just be like it was a little overwhelming for us. And we were lucky, like our insurance covered most of the testing and process. So it wasn't even, luckily for us in a place like Washington, D.C., it wasn't that it was like super expensive necessarily, at least that part, the testing part. It wasn't that it was super expensive. It was just that it was really time consuming, right? And I was like, I can't take off any more days from work. I have to like go to this place that's really far away to get care. It's like not off the metro. It was just like a lot of logistics to manage. We had to go to like a therapy session. So, and all of this paperwork had to happen before we could even like start the actual process, although this is part of the process. So once we like determined that that it was viable, that I had eggs, that it was viable for me to carry the baby, then we had to find a donor. Wow. Do you know how many Black donors there are? I mean, I feel like people have been talking about this a lot in the news and media recently. But gosh, there's not that many. And my Black wife and I were committed to having a Black child, and like, and particular, and having a Black donor in particular. And so we did a lot of scouring. We wanted to use a sperm bank. There are lots of other ways to do this that don't involve sperm banks, including like having a known donor, or I've heard like some really good Facebook groups that are specifically for folks who are looking for Black donors. For us, because of kind of the legality of it, we thought it would just be easier to go with this sperm bank. So we did. So we had a donor from a sperm bank, and we bought two vials, exactly two. And we were like, I guess we'll just come back if we need more. What our fertility doctor told us was, if you haven't, because we were doing IUI without any hormones, our fertility doctor said, if you don't get pregnant after like the third time, or fourth time, maybe we should probably revisit and think about IVF. So in February of 2020, we tried our first treatment. We had been like tracking ovulation, and again, we only had two vials. So we'd been tracking ovulation, and like we ran into the center on the day that I was like at peak ovulation. And it was very like ceremonial. So I'm like up in stirrups, and my wife is there holding my hand, and there's like four nurses trying to like stick some sperm up inside of me, and they're also like they've got like a sonogram on an ultrasound on my stomach. It's like a whole thing. It's like a production. They've turned the lights off. It's like meditative. It feels very ceremonial. um I get my period. I was like, okay, I guess it's over. They make me come in for a pregnancy test just in case. Not pregnant. The next month, COVID lockdown happens, or like, COVID precautions begin. And we're like, oh, I guess we're never gonna do this. And then in May, we were like, well, like it's been a couple months, like let's just try again. And yeah, we got pregnant. And so I found out I was pregnant in June of 2020. Um, which was kind of a wild ass time to be pregnant because we're like in a pandemic. I mean, we're still in a pandemic, just so we're clear. We're in a pandemic and like kind of the beginnings of this pandemic. We are like only going out for like toilet paper. And actually, I'm just like doing drive up. Um, we're in the middle of uprisings in defense of Black life. I By day, I run a rapid response social justice fund that resources Black folks, Indigenous folks, and folks of color who are doing movement organizing. I'm also like doing rapid response funding on the front lines while like trying to survive a pandemic and also survive being Black in the world. And also my first trimester of pregnancy where I'm like tired and throwing up all the time. And it was just a really hard, isolating time, I think, too, just like not having because of COVID, right? Like not having family support, like even going to the doctor, there were times where I had to go in like for my ultrasounds without my wife, right? So she couldn't be in the room with me. She couldn't come in with me. So it's just a really hard and weird time, but we got a beautiful baby out of it. And we initially had planned a home birth. So we had a midwifery collective and a doula. And then I ended up having to transfer to a midwife center at a hospital after like 26 hours of labor and then another 20 something. So it was ultimately a 47-hour labor. But again, I'll probably be reminding the baby about this at like 5. I'm like, I did 47 hours of labor to get you out. But it was it was still like a really special birth and we got this wonderful child out of it. So yeah, that's a bit about our birth story. Please ask me any
That's
questions you
so
have.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I love the story. I love all the process and the fact that you did this during a pandemic. You're so strong. Just
Thank
like
you.
I know it's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's kind of wild to think that like our baby has only experienced pandemic times. Like if I like get in the car without a mask on, they're like, Mama, mask, Mama, mask off. Like they like know. Which is like, yeah, it's fascinating. And it also just like as a new parent was pretty kind of isolating, right? Like I would stay up at night with the fear of like what will happen if my child gets COVID, like will this kill us, will this kill my child, right? I had lots of family loss including my own father during the pandemic from COVID. And like the fear of my child, like you don't know if you're immunocompromised. Sometimes you don't know until and so I didn't know what like health issues might come up. I will say that our baby had COVID in like December of 2021. Yeah. So like last Christmas plans were canceled because our child had COVID. So like it's just been really scary and weird and isolating, like we still take precautions, and so our baby's gonna get on the plane for the first time ever pretty soon. It's like it's just wild. It's just a very different world than the one I had and than the one many other parents had. And it has meant like a tremendous drop in the amount of like resources and community and care and support that we had access to as new parents.
I hear that so difficult and there's so much to navigate. And I really resonate with that fear because I have a 4-month-old who can't get, the vaccines until 6 months. So I'm like in that like fear every minute, masking, very
Yeah.
careful who's around the baby if they're like cautious or not. So
Yep.
I'm there with you. I'm wondering
Yeah.
how you're doing now, like the fourth trimester. I mean, it just goes on longer than anyone ever tells you. Like your body's getting back to place. Will it ever be there? Mentally we're different, hormonally we're different. And then our identity shifts. How do you feel about your identity now, as a new parent?
Yeah. And I don't even know if I'm allowed to say new when it's been 20 months, but I'm not sure like how long I can keep calling myself a new parent. I'm like giving myself till about 5, but I don't know if that's true
Sounds
or not.
about right.
But I do feel like, yeah, like first of all, I think as the oldest, so I just have to say this, I think that as the oldest daughter and the amount of caretaking I did in a really chaotic, violent, sometimes and just like kind of, yeah, like unstable home, um I thought I was prepared for caretaking. I am often I show up as a caretaker in my life and in the lives of the people that I love, and so I thought that I had practiced. I had skills. I'm also a Virgo, if that means anything, right? I thought that I had a lot of skills
Listen,
and
Beyonce
practice.
is a Virgo. We
Exactly.
understand the level of detail. We get
The
it.
level of detail, the level of caretaking, um, yeah, like the level of nurturing that I had exerted in relationships and like partnerships and like friendships and at work, right? Like I thought I was like an expert. Wow. Parenting is incredibly humbling. I don't, I think that maybe people told me it was hard. I feel like no one ever told me how hard it actually was. I don't know if I would have believed them when people told me that it was hard. I think that I might have had some ego around like, no, 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 but I have lots of practice caretaking. Like I meal prep every week, whatever, right? I cook every meal, right? I can blend all the foods myself. I can breastfeed. I can go back to work after like 2.5, 3 months. It was irrational. It was probably a little self too self-assured. Um, I think also I didn't like really count like take into account the like lack of family support that we would have because of COVID. Um, and it was just than harder than I could have imagined. It was harder on my body. I would say that like postpartum, I had like numerous health issues from like lower back sciatica. I had issues with breastfeeding and chest feeding. I had gallstones, a liver issue. Like all my internal organs were like, we don't know where to go and like how to get back to where we were. And also we're very tired. So we might just shut down. Like everything was like, we're done. That was too much. My knees were hurting. Like it was just a lot. I feel like 20 months in, I feel a lot more like myself while honoring and acknowledging that myself is not the same self as pre-pregnancy, right? And pre-baby. Um, I'm transformed in the service of in the process of creating new life, and I'm okay with that. I'm not who I was before, and that's okay. I'm not who I was physically. Like my body has changed. Like this body also did something really magical though, and like miraculous. And like I think that like people give birth all the time. People give birth all the time. And I'm like, wait, I mean, I already knew this. Like I've mostly worked in like gender justice organizing and organizations, but like, wow, there's no like universal parental leave. That's wild. Like even for folks who work in the government, it's like 6 weeks. And I'm just like, even that, and that's like kind of best case scenario jobs, right? Like 6 weeks, like at 6 weeks, I was still bleeding. At 6 weeks, like the baby was waking up every hour and a half to nurse for 45 minutes at a time. It's inhumane, it's violent, it's sexist, it's misogyny, it's patriarchy, it's such a deep injustice. And I feel like, yeah, it also like overly impacts people of color, it overly impacts working class folks and queer folks, right? And so um I think that in terms of like my physical and emotional and like spiritual, mental body, myself, I still don't feel totally at home in my body if I have to like tell the truth. I still kind of look at myself like, who are you? Like, who is this new person? Sometimes I like can't believe that I'm a parent. But most days I would say like the kind of acute fourth trimester experiences of like the fogginess, the like the brain fog, the blues. I was like super anxious and super depressed, right? Some of that stuff has like gotten a lot better. And some of it has not, right? Like I'm still tired all the time, even though I feel like I shouldn't even tell this to you with a 4 month old, but our baby, even though our baby sleeps through the night, I still have really bad insomnia because I'm just afraid they're going to wake up. And so some of it gets better and some of it maybe, I don't know, maybe some of it we just learn how to cope with differently.
Yeah, I agree that you're just a different person and that's okay. Like I
Yeah.
definitely was one of those like over self-assured. I think I still am. Like I can do it all. My life's not going to change. I'm going to be great. I'm going to go everywhere, do everything, and the baby's going to come. And there's so much work behind all of that performance. There's
Yeah.
so much like every little step, and at the center of the universe is making sure this child is okay. Um,
Yes.
that they feel good and safe and happy and that they're not, just being pushed by our agenda, right? Of like where
Yeah.
we want to go and what we want to do. Like they're absolutely the
Yeah.
priority. And
Yeah.
I'm okay with that too. Like you're saying, like your body is transformed, you're transformed. Also, like in life, like I'm not the same friend I was, I'm not the same family member,
No.
not the same like coworker I was. and that's okay. Like, I'm entering a new role. And
Yeah.
I think it takes time to like undo and process and like figure that out. So even 20 months in, I imagine I'm still gonna be figuring it out too.
I will absolutely want to check in to know the answer to that. How you feeling at 20 months? It's been like super fun. Like this age has been really, really fun. I have to say the newborn phase was like not the most fun for me. This is super exhausting because wow, it's like you're constantly trying to keep them from like hurting themselves, but it's so fun and they have like so much, they always have personality, but like watching it shine through has been really fun. But yeah, you're not the same person. We're not the same people that we were. And I think that I had to let go of this belief that I could do everything. I mean, I still kind of, I'm a Virgo. I kind of believe that I can, but I do think there's a way in which I thought going back to work after like 3 months, less than 3 months, I thought I was like, oh, like I want to feel like my old self. I feel like this baby is like consuming everything, taking everything from me. Um, I should go back to work. Like that's gonna help, right? And then I got back to work and I was like, why are people emailing me? Don't they know I just had a baby? Like, why would you send me emails? Like, I just did this like really hard transformative thing, and I feel like no one cares, right? It was just like a really bizarre experience of feeling like I was like really straddling like two worlds, two identities. And I think I've just like leaned into yeah, I'm all of these things and sometime I'm more of one and sometimes I'm like less of another and that's okay. Right? And this role like you said of parenting and for me explicitly like motherhood, right? Is like a new role. Like we wouldn't expect people to be like great at a new job in 4 months, right? Like we have to give ourselves time to like learn this new role and also humans are complicated and change and yeah, and we're like constantly like figuring out how to be in relationship with each other even at 20, even at 4 months and even at 20 months. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have a little one to get
Yep,
to.
I have
I
to go
want
pick them up from daycare.
I want to end by asking you, what advice would you give to new parents and parents who are considering the non-binary approach? What would you share with them?
Hmm. I think I'll start with like what I would tell parents who are considering like using like a non-binary kind of framing, right? Like a gender critical and gender expansive framing for how they like raise the child is that um to just have some grace for yourself, do what feels safe for you and your family in the specific community that you're in. And also, like, you can potentially be like a possibility model, not just for your child and your family, but for your community. And that you're not alone. Like, there are other people who are practicing and learning together, right? And we know that our current kind of like outdated gender norms and like ways in the world haven't been working for us, right? So this is about creating new ways. Adrienne Marie Brown talks a lot about like there's this idea of like organizing being science fiction. And I think parenting too, in some ways, is like creating a world that we haven't seen yet. And so, like, yeah, welcome to helping us create and shape this world that we haven't seen yet for like the futures who are yet to come. Yeah, I want to be like just a good ancestor. And then what I'd say to new parents is like, oh, hold on tight, ask for help when you need it. And like I think it's really helpful to like just cultivate community. And also I would just add that like I've been most surprised by the kinds of allies that I would like never have been friends with before having a child. Like, like I'm just like, oh, like that nice white lady, like whatever, like just like some like random, like middle class, like cis het white woman. I'm like, oh, like we're like best friends and we text now about like getting our children to do baby led weaning, right? Like baby led feeding, right? So it's like you also like parenting, like invites you into like building relationships with folks that may surprise you. And so just would just say like look for support in ways that might surprise you. And also like, yeah, extend a lot of grace to yourselves. Like we are resilient. We are like breaking generational curses. We are like healing our own inner children. Um, and we are doing this like powerful work to like raise beautiful free children. And so thank you for that gift and also yeah, for yeah, just for extending grace to yourself in the process.
Oh, I love that you said that you want to be a good ancestor. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful to think about. The work that you're doing is not only for your child and your family, but for those to come after in
Yep.
this cyclical nature. That's so
Yeah.
beautiful and so much wisdom there. Thank you so much for your time today. There's just like no way I could thank you for all the gems you dropped. And I'm wondering, before you leave, if there's anything that you want to say about, where we can find you, letting the folks know, like, where can we like look up your work and just like see what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, I have a website. It's aliciasanchezgill.com. So it's pretty easy to find. I also am pretty active on Twitter for as long as Twitter is there. And it's Alicia Sanchez on Twitter. So that's probably, I mean, I'm on Instagram too at Alicia Sanchez, but I don't post very much, mostly just memes. So if you like memes, let me know.
Love a good meme.
Yeah,
Well,
same.
Alicia, thank you so much for your time today. I know that so many people are going to watch this and just, really take up and soak up all the information that you dropped. Wishing you and your family all the best. Happy holidays. And please stay in touch and continue to just let me know how your family's doing.
Thank
Sending you
you.
all my
Same.
love. Thank you.
Mutually. Yeah. Thank you so much. Mutually.